to you? Yeah. So I'm just going to try to go through this quickly and, hopefully have time for questions. So bear with me. Let's just get started. So first of all, you should know that there is actually a vision for quantum across Europe. And there is something called a quantum flagship, which is a €1 billion program that was set up by the European Commission to further all things that are quantum technologies. And the reason that this is special is because there's only 3 flagships in the EU. The first was the graphene flagship, to figure out what the hell to do with this mystery magical material graphene. The second was the human brain flagship, also €1 billion. And then we've got the quantum flagship, because Europe foundationally believes that this will lead to us keeping prosperity this time in Europe when we create, cool advancements in science, research, and engineering. And the area is divided into 4 categories. And I have lost slides. Oh my goodness. I thought I was going to be left out of the whole slide drama, but yes. What happened is we have these 4 areas. So imagine these, 4 things. The first, what you're going to see is a quantum computer there. And, that's obviously the thing that we talk about the most, but that is not the only thing when we talk about quantum. So you have a quantum computer, but you also have quantum communication, you have quantum simulation, and then you have sensing and metrology to do more specific measurements and all kinds of cool stuff. And in order for us to actually have this vision, this promise of all this money and intellectual property and retention of patents and all this other cool stuff for Europe, there's a lot of underlying work that needs to happen in addition to that as well. And that's all the things that we need in order to have these systems actually work with engineering and control, the foundational science that happens underneath that, and also theory, algorithms, and protocols. So in short, this is a huge program involving pretty much every single university across Europe. So there's a lot of people working on this. This is genuinely, not a dash in the pan, because we've been doing it for a while, and the ambition is to get here, which is a sort of quantum internet, which is connecting everything to everything else, but at the quantum technological level. So I just told you about these other technologies, right? Imagine a network that is running on quantum communication, that is connecting quantum computers to each other, that also enables the sensing and metrology to work together and do quantum simulation as well. That's what we're talking about. And the kind of promise of some of these technologies in sensing and metrology is to have a quantum gravimeter, where you can actually imagine that Shell will use it to find oil, or do you need something?
Yes, please.
Do you want a hug? No. Oh, sure. Yeah.
Hey, good. Sorry for the introduction. Does anyone know Andrew Coles in the room? So,
is it Court as in C-O-U-R-T?
Yes.
CTF.
CTF. Thank you very much. Thanks. Sorry.
Yep. Okay, not a hug.
Next time.
All right, thank you. I'll hold you to that. So let's talk about what kind of problems can you solve with a quantum computer, because this is actually the thing that everybody wants to know, right? What can you actually do? Some people will argue that for a very long time we've been seeing Moore's law in effect, right? You guys know what Moore's law is. Anybody not know what Moore's law is? Okay, good. So that you've been seeing Moore's law for a very long time, but what we're seeing is the emergence of Amdahl's law, which is that's nice. You can keep building your little processors, but you're not actually achieving greater computing power. In fact, it's declining. So because of this emergence of Amdahl's law, there's this notion that we actually need a fundamentally different architecture in order to build our future systems, which can actually do, the large data set problems that we're giving them, and do the needle in the haystack problems. And the kinds of applications that are being imagined are things like doing protein mapping and folding, stuff that we already have AI systems at DeepMind doing, but also early detection of cancer. And then when you look beyond that, the hype cycle part of this is gigantic. And in a lot of ways, quantum resembles things that are happening in AI, which is that there's a huge amount of promise. And what we had in AI is we had the AI winter, where you had this huge promise, investors put a shitload of money in there, and then you had this little decline, and they called it the AI winter. And then they're emerging back from that winter, thanks to LLM and ChatGPT. We see a similar type of phenomenon with quantum. And that means that companies are also pouring, again, shitloads of money collectively into this. So Microsoft, IBM, Google, everybody is working on a quantum computer. Everybody is competing. Like, yours is not a real quantum computer, mine is. It's that kind of disagreements that we're getting into, and it's a complete race as to who will get where first, and is that good enough for the rest? So you might remember that Google claimed quantum supremacy, and then Microsoft was like, really? Is that really supremacy? There are plenty of memes, that you could make just on that discussion alone. IBM's development roadmap is impressive just for one reason. This is a project plan that actually meets its milestones. So every milestone that they have promised, they have met. So earlier this year, they released Condor with an enormous amount of qubits. And what's interesting about this is it's like this expectation of exponential expansion. So once you get to a particular threshold with the amount of qubits that you have, then you will be able to incrementally increase. You might be thinking, wait a minute, what the fuck is a qubit? That brings me to my next slide. So, the biggest property of a quantum computer is that we stop talking about bits and we start talking about things that are called qubits. And a qubit is basically a quantum bit. And, you might have heard people say that it's basically a 0 and 1 at the same time. Think of it more abstractly. It's basically a place where you can run computation. So instead of having a single space to run a computation, you can basically hold that in 2 spaces. And they're just being held there virtually. And while you have this virtual hold, you actually have this potential space for doing all kinds of cool stuff. So when you take those qubits and you do this funky thing that quantum lets us do, which is entanglement, which I think actually is the most romantic property of quantum, which basically means that you have 2 particles that are coupled together, and regardless of the distance, this is what every girl wants, regardless of the distance, right? Something that happens to one of them is immediately felt by the other. Right? I know, you didn't expect this to get mushy, but here we are. So, and entanglement is super funky because this is the thing that actually gives a quantum computer scale. Because when you entangle these qubits, right, and they become coupled in this way, maximally coupled, you're basically creating more states. Let's do some math. Who's ready for that? Ready? Okay. So let's do 2 to the n states, which is the amount of possibility spaces you have to do your computation. So let's start easy. What's 2 to the 2nd power? Right. 2 to the 3rd power is? I heard a 6. Shame on you. Okay. And then 2 to the 4th is? 16. Thank you. So you get the idea. We have this doubling. Okay? All right, so here's a notion. This is why quantum computers are so amazingly funky from this perspective. So if I had the biggest supercomputer on Earth, right? Where is the biggest supercomputer on Earth? Anybody know? Come on, guys.
China?
Probably. So, you have the biggest supercomputer on Earth. If I, want to double its computing capacity, what do I need to do? No, dude, stop with the punchline. No, that's what I get to say. No, look, so if you want the biggest supercomputer on Earth that's currently in China, what do you need to do? You need to build another supercomputer if you want to double it. If you want to double a quantum computer, what do? Now you go. Thank you. You add a qubit. Okay, so that notion is pretty darn powerful. If all we need to do is add 1 more qubit to exponentially expand our computing potential space, that becomes interesting. Okay? So this is why everyone is slathering over the potential possibilities of doing this, because right now our current computers don't do certain things well. For example, the properties around quantum that make it so interesting are these fragility no cloning principles. Because when you are existing in these quantum states, any perturbation, right? Any observation or noise or someone trying to look at these quantum particles actually means that the whole thing collapses. It doesn't like it. It's finicky. It's very temperamental, and the quantum state will collapse. So they don't do well with trying to do a replay attack. All right? Or if you're trying to observe the traffic in motion, they don't do well. So this becomes interesting from an information security perspective. And now when we want to talk about it, so all nice, I get it, but why are we actually worried about this as a threat to cryptography? Well, it's because all of our modern cryptography especially our public key cryptography, is based on some foundational problems, right? So we always talk about Alice and Bob, our friends, right? Alice and Bob, they basically exchange communication with each other using cryptography, which underlies two foundational math problems: integer factorization and discrete log. Integer factorization basically means I've got an integer, right? A number, a big number, and I want to figure out what its constituent parts are made out of. And let me explain something to you. Can I pick on someone? Who can I pick on? I feel like I need to pick on colleagues. Johnny, what is, I know he's dying now. It's so good. Johnny, what is, 11 times 10?
6.
This is going in his performance review. So, no, but what's 11 times 10 do? You can do this. 110, thank you. So, okay, so you got that, right? So 11 times 10 is 110. That was not so difficult, except for the 6. The idea is our brains work really well when I ask you to multiply something. The person over here, so if I ask you, what's 9 times 8? Okay, what are all the factors of 72? What are all the numbers you can multiply together to get 72?
6.
Right. His 6 was legitimate because our brains work the same way that our current computers do. When we need to multiply forward, we can do that quickly, but so can the computer. When we need to reverse that, damn it. When we need to reverse that one-way function, our brain struggles, but so do our modern computers. That's integer factorization. A quantum computer, however, does not struggle. So they can do this stuff really well and, more importantly, really fast. The other thing is discrete log, which is basically the clock arithmetic you see on the bottom. If I give you the formula 3 to the 16th with a modulus, which is basically a remainder of 17, you get the answer of 1. But if I only show you the clock, right, you're not going to be able to derive the formula that was used to create it. Is that notion clear? All right. Now, those two problems are foundational in our cryptography. A quantum computer can reverse it thanks to Peter Shor and Love Grover. Not this Grover, Love Grover. And Love Grover basically figured out how to do these calculations while trying multiple possibilities at the same time. And this optimization of this means that the time you need to reverse these one-way functions, because Shor already had an algorithm, before there was ever a notion of a quantum computer that was going to be viable for us to build and work on, Shor already had an algorithm that we could potentially use, that we could run if we had such a computer. And Grover had this potential to make this optimized thing that would trial these possibilities, which would mean that we could calculate things quicker. Is this notion clear? This is why it's a foundational threat to our current cryptography. So look, you guys know, if you've been here today, you know that even if you would have great cryptography, you still need good hardware, operating systems, protocols, applications. And you guys all know how good we are at that, right? So assuming that you have this bulletproof layer of cryptography, and if you just add that, you're fine, is bullshit. It's complete bullshit. You need to fix all the other underlying stuff because no intelligent attacker is going to try to attack your bulletproof crypto if all of this other stuff is broken. And even if you do all this stuff well magically and you're a really hard target, then you still need to understand what it is exactly you're trying to protect and from whom, because even then, the potential that they have even greater resources to attack you, that is still there. And when we look at when, it really depends. It depends on what that attacker has at their disposal. So what you're looking at is two axes. On the x-axis, you're looking at the time to factor an L-bit number. So that's the length of a number that you're trying to factor. And then this bottom axis is the amount of qubits you have at your disposal. So if you take a look at the NIST recommended key length for RSA, which is right here, this dotted line in the middle, what you're seeing is that operations that would have taken potentially a billion years to complete will be reduced to a few seconds, or a second, or underneath a second, the more qubits you would have at your disposal. Yeah? So when is it dependent on what you saw me show you with the IBM roadmap? When do we get to this point where we have hundreds of thousands or even millions of qubits and we have this viable quantum computer that's actually capable of breaking RSA because of the amount of computations it's able to perform? Is this notion clear? All right. So there's another problem. It's not just that we need to wait around for a quantum computer. The other reason is, and I will tell you the honest truth, we're already fucked. And that is because we have a foundational issue in this capture now, decrypt later thing. This is a photo of the NASA data center facility in Utah. I think it's actually really pretty. But this facility is, known for ages to make snapshots of the internet, specifically of encrypted communications. And look, if you're just going to capture encrypted communications and store it until you do have a viable means to decrypt it, I think that is already an interesting attack vector just in and of itself. And you take a look at, okay, so there's a quantum computer. You showed me RSA. What about everything else? Well, that's the problem. Because even with symmetric keys, we worry about things like, okay, even with AES, you'll still need to take the largest key length you have. So you still need 256-bit keys. And we're still worried about key exchange mechanisms, the KEMs. And every single public key algorithm that we have is also at risk. So bottom line, there is a hell of a lot of impact, which means we need to have a plan to do something else than do what we currently do. And when you want to ask yourself, what does that mean to my enterprise or company or country? Well, I'd like to start with asking 3 questions. First of all, how long is it that you need to keep that stuff secure that you're using your encryption for today? Does anybody here work for healthcare? 13 years in healthcare. Wow. Hats off to you. Obviously, healthcare records for me would be the time that you would need to have the longest amount of preservation. Let's say that you would theoretically need to keep healthcare records safe for a human lifetime. I have to tell you, we don't know how to do that yet. If we would have genetic information, if you were 23andMe and you had sequenced everybody's DNA, it's not just about one lifetime, it's about potentially having information that would be interesting for their progeny. So multiple lifetimes. We don't know how to do that yet. So that's the first question, is how long do you need to keep your data secure? The second question is how long before there is a viable quantum computer that breaks our secrets? So I used to be the member of this quantum flagship. I was the vice chair of the EU flagship, the billion-euro thingy. And I have to tell you that speaking to people who are actually building these things, that the outlook, and this is already back in 2020, was 10 years. So by 2030, we will have a viable quantum computer. That was the outlook. And the question is, will it be in the public domain is a different question. That's a national security question. But we will have one. And then the third question is, how long do we, this group, not only in this room, but in every room like this all across the planet, need to work on having a transition plan from our current systems to one that is quantum safe? How long do we need? Let's take a look at how we did with IPv4 to IPv6 transition. That's an indication. So, what we really should do is think incredibly pragmatically about our network architectures and think about, okay, let's be smart. We have the advice. We already had it from the NSA Suite B stuff, back in 2014, where they said already, NSA said to the US government, everybody, increase your key length for all of your current encryption algorithms. They already said that. We can already do that now. So if you're using crypto in your network, make sure you're using the maximum key length afforded by that algorithm. The second thing is look for options. There might be very specific places where you can do something called quantum key distribution. This is not ubiquitous currently, but there might be some specific opportunities. And finally, what I do think is the best long-term bet is investigate post-quantum algorithms. Even though there haven't been officially announced by NIST, there are options available to all of us for this. So let's explain QKD in a minute. We go back to our friends Alice and Bob. Alice and Bob are in a relationship. Unfortunately, Eve, the jealous ex-girlfriend, wants to know what Bob's doing. So as a result of which, Eve wants to spy on Alice and Bob's communication, and what she tries to do is, hook up to their quantum channel. And what did we say about cloning and fragility and replay attacks, right? If Eve is trying to spy again on Bob, Alice and Bob know. It's kind of sad for Eve, right? So the basic way that it works is really simple. We basically have, you guys know what polarizers are, right? We have polarized sunglasses. So it basically lets light in one way and doesn't let it out another way. It's usually when you rotate it at a specific angle, roughly 90 degrees. So you rotate at a 90-degree angle, light does get let in or does not get in. So what you do is you have a configuration of polarizers, diagonal and horizontal. You set them up in a certain way, And that configuration is relayed from Alice to Bob over a secondary channel. There are some flaws already here. This sounds like typical key exchange issues. There are typical key exchange issues here. And then there's a single photon emitter on one end from Alice. It's emitting a single photon. It goes through Alice's polarizers. If Eve is in the middle of this, that perturbation occurs, and then Bob gets gibberish. That's how they know they can detect for the presence of Eve. Is this notion clear? All right. So that's QKD in a nutshell. And there's all these different flavors of QKD that you can implement, on production telco networks. The favorite one is MDI QKD, which is measurement device independent. But there's some really cool stuff happening, because how many of you have dedicated fiber between you and everyone you communicate with? No one. And that's the point of free space QKD. So the idea is, because we don't all have dedicated fiber between Alice and Bob, which you might have, by the way, for a primary and secondary data center or some backup facility, free space QKD says, no, I can actually transmit these signals with a very powerful light emitter just over free space. So this was one of the first experiments that happened between Lanzarote and Tenerife in Europe. We're the pioneers of everything free space. And this showed that over like a length of 144 kilometers, this also worked. Problem is, the Chinese did it bigger and better and in space. So in 2016, they launched the first quantum communications satellite. This Professor Pan Xiangwei, he was a student in Austria, and he then managed to make a secure video conference call between him and the University of Innsbruck in China. I told you about my €1 billion flagship, which we're super proud of in Europe, right? That's €1 billion over 10 years. China every year on quantum technologies spends 10 billion euros per year. We're not going to win on the basis of Moneyball, right? If there was a race based on who had the most money, we're not going to win the race, right? 1 billion over 10 years versus 10 billion over every year. And all these commercial companies, because there's always a sort of government stake in it, they have all invested into this. And now this network, initially it was only a 2,000 kilometer network. Now it's a 10,000 kilometer network. It covers like most of China. A QKD network. So really fiber cable between all of the major critical infrastructure and satellite connectivity on QKD. So Misius is the name of the Chinese satellite, and what you see is that it actually, how COVID did more for innovation and digitalization than every CIO ever? That's kind of like what Misius did for the Spur to do things in terms of space-based QKD. And so as a result of which, you had a bunch of projects all over the world that were actually trying to figure out how we could do more with space-based QKD and free space quantum key distribution. And there are some real options here. You could use this legitimately just as a bridge between terrestrial repeaters. You could have additional gains for confidentiality, the usual. You could actually use this to mitigate some risks that you would have in terms of space-based issues. And, still it's about finding those use cases. One of the things that I did when I was CISO at KPN, which is a telco, is we found critical infrastructure projects for banks that could actually make use of this space-based QKD to actually further their regular goals. But you could also use it for sharing infrastructure. So Vodafone, I don't know if you guys know this, totally esoteric subject, but Vodafone is putting a 5G network on the moon. Because you can. And one of the real options to do this is if you're going to share infrastructure like the early days of the internet or the early days of telecommunications, one of the most important things you need it for is to do interconnections and billing and that kind of stuff. And so it'll be a really good use case for that too. But it sometimes feels like a solution looking for problems rather than the other way around. And there's a lot of moving parts in terms of resilience. It's hard to fix stuff in space. Crypto agility is still the name of the game. What if your algorithm is broken? You need to swap that out. And then finally, supply chain security for all of this is really difficult. And this above image is of the Kessler effect, which I don't know if you remember, but there was an issue where Russia had destroyed a satellite, and then subsequently little pieces of that satellite then exponentially attacked other pieces of infrastructure, which then attacked other pieces, so eventually threatening the lives of the astronauts on board the ISS. So there's a lot of moving parts, literally, in trying to get this stuff right. And one of the things that we try to do terrestrially, we built in the Netherlands a quantum internet backbone, and this is already a couple of years old when we initially started, but the reason that it's the case is because we started initially doing this in 2016 with 2 locations, dedicated fiber, commercial equipment, and then what it really looks like under the hood when you try to do this at scale, when you want ubiquity, it's way more complex. This is the other reason that I prefer a post-quantum approach. So as you all know, NIST started with a project in 2016. It'll be finalized by next year in 2024. And most of it will be finalized. It's going to be a continuous iterative effort. And then eventually, we know that we're going to need 5 to 15 years to get everybody on track and migrated to the new solution. So you might have seen the round 4 finalists. So we had a bunch for key exchange mechanisms and encryption. So it's mostly, and I'm really happy to say this because it was a professor that we worked with, Peter Schwabe, who worked on crystals and Kyber. And dilithium. So those are accepted by NIST, and we still have a bunch of alternatives. You might have seen the news about Psych. Anyone see the news about Psych? Okay. So you don't always need a quantum computer to break a quantum algorithm. And that was what was proven by Psych. So someone took pretty much an old computer and found a mathematical weakness in Psych. And this is actually the kind of thing, this is why we need more eyeballs on this problem, because the what can go wrong here is still significant. We still have companies that think that they will find their own quantum algorithm for this. This is the worst thing we can do. There is no security and obscurity. We can keep saying it, but do not roll your own crypto. There are still attacks on our current crypto, which involve cryptanalysis and traffic analysis and, looking for faults in entropy. And these same problems also plague any post-quantum algorithms. So really, there's always stuff that can go wrong. The best thing we can do is kick the shit around a lot more and watch it break before we're all deploying it globally. And even when we do that, we're still going to have to balance equities between, governments and their arguments to either weaken or ban this cryptography altogether. So that requires the security community to kind of stay on par and figure out how to make sure that we're still doing the right thing when necessary, and not saying, oh yeah, sure, we'll enable the Ghost protocol on WhatsApp and you can have everything you need. We need to make sure that doesn't happen in the quantum realm as well, and we're not deliberately weakening these algorithms like we did when we introduced algorithms for mobile communication. And in terms of post-quantum crypto, the biggest thing is, and this is a question that I genuinely have to you. Someone earlier today asked, who knows all of the things on their network, right? That's a good question. Who knows all of the crypto you currently use in your enterprise? Who knows any of it? No, seriously. How much, even if we have asset management and inventory management, how many of us have any concept of the current cryptography that we use across our enterprise? Any of it. We don't know. We assume that it will work somehow magically because it needs to talk to someone else, and that's not true. We need to actually start with an inventory of crypto assets. We need to figure out how we get it ready for this implementation. We need to look for opportunities for crypto agility so that if stuff breaks, if one algorithm winds up breaking through this process, that we can swap it out with something else, because we can't swap these algorithms arbitrarily for what we have now. We need to have policies and hardware and software vendor stuff and all the usual blah, blah, compliancy stuff. So the biggest thing is we need to do this, start failing early, because the roadmap, in order to get us to readiness, and I will give you my slides, so please don't think that we start with awareness. We need to figure out what discovery, start implementing and test again, and then finally make sure we have a backup plan and monitoring and able to look at these algorithms. And obviously, I'm not asking you all to run out and go start your quantum journey if you're not doing the basics right. So if you don't know your own network, if you don't know your vendor elements, you're not doing any third-party managing, if you don't do anything around vulnerability management programs or understand your data security needs, start there. But what I hate about our industry is we wait for stuff to get urgent that is important that we knew ages ago. We know stuff is going to be end of life. How many of you have zero end of life in your networks? We all do. So I hate the fact that we don't fix things that we could have fixed early before they turn into, a triple fire alarm and then everyone's running because we enjoy the crisis. When it comes to vendors, I think it starts about asking the right questions. So engage those things. Again, you can get these, but I think it starts by saying, what are you doing about this? What are your plans for this transition? How are you going to work with your own vendors? And there are already products out there that you can play with now. First of all, you can already get an account on the IBM quantum computer. Qiskit, which is the programming language, is all based on Python. There's a lot of other demonstrator quantum computers because they do want to have cloud computing available with quantum. That's one of the major goals, is accessibility. So there's a lot of places where you can already start playing. But there's also a lot of places where you can also look at other products. So OpenSSH is working on quantum stuff. Malvat VPN is using that. There's CodeCrypt. There's all these post-quantum companies. And then there's, of course, the Open Quantum Safe Alliance, which is a whole resource for all of you to just kind of get started. But I think this is the most important thing I can say, is that you just need to get started. And also, when we look at issues that will inevitably occur, like they did to Psych that was broken, that we actually need to be able to evaluate that information correctly. Because some of it is also equally overhyped. There were reports of other algorithms being broken. They are not correct, but it's only because when there are power analysis attacks, they can break multiple things, not just the one algorithm that was reported. And in conclusion, and I appreciate you guys listening to all of this on quantum after doing math after 5. It's a huge accomplishment. I want to remind you that it's a journey and you just need to get started. These are 2 reports that I worked on as part of the World Economic Forum work, and they're for your, yourself to take a look at where's the current state of quantum computing and what kinds of things can we do to transition. They're also for your CIO, CTO, whatever, C-layer, to just, lay on their desk and let them see, so that you actually have the funding to go ahead and do this. Make sure that you organize and find your friends. So your ISAC community is a potential source of support. So is your CERT community. And please, if I could ask you one thing, is to get your hands dirty and then talk about it. We need way more cooperation and communication here, because we are not collaborating because of all the national security interest in this space. So that's something we really need. Thank you so much for your attention. Thank you. Questions? Or just beer? Yes. Yeah.
With the KQD thing, does that mean that if it comes out as noise, if there's someone in the middle, is that a new kind of DDoSing report?
Yeah, actually, one of the initial attacks that was done was, so it's a fiber optic cable with a specific color light. So one of the initial attacks was Eve was just being horrible and just shining a bright light into the thing. So everything was gone. So there was just you can absolutely DDoS that. But then you have to be, when that dark fiber is being in the middle, you have to find either a sort of dark fiber vampire attack or actually physically have an intercept in the middle, which will mean that from day 0 you'll notice that Eve's there. Yeah. Oh, by the way, I should say why the light. It wasn't just Eve being in a horrible mood. That's so you could read the configuration of the detectors. So remember there's the polarizers on the other side and the detectors on the other side? So in order to understand which configuration was communicated, by shining light, you can try to get some partial information from how those detectors are configured. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That figure you gave about transferring being able having quantum degree. How sure are we that, three-letter agencies in China who don't really have the ability to do that?
We don't know that. That's the whole point. So if you remember, there was, so look, my favorite example is a historical one. So you remember the Enigma machine, right? Everybody remembers Alan Turing? Okay. So who can tell me how long, so we used Enigma, we, had the war, then subsequently, what happened to those machines? What do we do?
The British cracked them and then gave them to Americans.
As like, use this crypto, it's really good. And then meanwhile, the British could read all the communications for roughly 30 years after the war. Okay? What do you think we're going to do if somebody suddenly finds a way to have a quantum computer that works to read everybody else's secret? They're not going to run out and be like, hey, I can see it, stop communicating that. They're not going to tell you. This is my point about, like, go out, get your hands dirty, and tell everyone. Yeah.
With the post-quantum computer, it sounds like they always say, the quantum computer will be ready in 5 years, and then again, in 5 years, and then we don't even have the algorithms yet. It's really hard to justify the investment.
Yeah.
It's like, it's going to be there, but then it hasn't materialized yet.
Yeah. Don't forget the algorithms, by the way, they're all already there. And I want to warn you, when the algorithms are there, it is not a drop and replace. There are bandwidth issues, there's optimization issues, there's CPU utilization. You can't pop it on an IoT device just like that. So what NIST is trying to do, in fact, NIST isn't even, okay, so we're round 4 with the encryption algorithms, but they have launched yet another call for new digital signatures because they want more stuff that is not lattice-based and also has better optimization for like some of these considerations. So we're not there. So I don't want us to wait till there's like this perfect moment that NIST then says, yes, here thou shalt have the holy things, because even then stuff can get broken and replaced. We need like a sort of baking time. We need the toothpick to keep checking the middle of the brownie. So this is a terrible analogy, but you get where I'm going with this. We need to kind of continuously be able to check and verify that these things work and are properly suited for the problem we're using them for. This is why I would encourage you. We already have a set. I gave you that set. NIST has already released those. Go ahead and play. Yeah. Anyone else? Well, thank you again. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.